The Milwaukee Bucks clinch the 5 seed and a rematch with the Indiana Pacers in the first round of the playoffs. Uh, are the Bucks in a much better position than they were a season ago beyond just Giannis's health? And what are some of the trends we've seen from these Doc Rivers lineups? We dig into that conversation coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined by Frank Madden. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for checking out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. You can still sign up for free at lockedondaily.com to get your day started with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Frank, the Bucks take down the Pistons in Detroit, so the 5 seed is clinched, and another game where the bench has a very productive night, scoring 51 points. But oh, by the way, Giannis records another triple-double and just continues to display another level of dominance after the All-Star break.
Yeah, I mean, 15 assists, which, the only thing that can make that not seem incredible is the fact that he dropped the 20 assist triple-double a week ago. But, this was a really interesting test for the Bucks, right? This 6-game winning streak that they came into this game with was, had some weird games, like obviously the win against Minnesota was 3/4 of very bad
Terrible.
and 1/4 of, the most dominant basketball the Bucks have played all season. Obviously a couple games mixed in against the Pelicans that, of course you should win those regardless of who is or isn't playing. But, Justin, I gotta say, right, every year really since the dawn of the Bud era, obviously the goal for this team has been contending for a championship. I have major questions, especially with the Dame injury and obviously just the ups and downs of the season, like how realistic that is of a goal right now. But I've just been having fun watching basketball these last couple weeks. And, I was really happy hearing Giannis make some comments the other night about him just having fun right now playing basketball. And, again, like sometimes you just got to kind of simplify things and not overthink watching the Milwaukee Bucks night to night. And, we may not get a meaningful 80-second game, but at a minimum.
Did you say?
Well, in the sense we're not going to get a meaningful 80-second game. But in this case, that's a good thing. It would have been fun, to win on Sunday if they had lost tonight and do it in front of the home crowd. But in the grand scheme of the universe, I think this was, an impressive performance against a Pistons team that I thought came out and competed really well, and they played well. I mean, I thought both teams actually played really well. Both teams shot the ball well. We saw some of the chippiness and fire from the two teams that, kind of had us thinking about like the intensity and the kind of playoff-ishness of this game coming into it. So I thought the game lived up to expectations, and I was really happy for the Bucks and the players that they were able to respond whenever the Pistons kind of really pushed them. The Bucks always had a counterpunch, and obviously it began with Giannis and his dominance in what is obviously, we're assuming, his last game of another just incredible regular season. And fortunately, a lot of guys who have been playing well and being those, really strong supporting cast players of late, including KPJ and others, continue to do what they needed to do tonight. So, yeah, what this sets up the Bucks for in the playoffs, I don't know. But I really enjoyed the end of this regular season, and it's nice to be ending, a very tumultuous regular season, at least on a high note, and being able to feel like the players seem to also be enjoying themselves a bit.
Yeah, and you go back to last year and how the season ended, and obviously Giannis being out is the biggest part there. Of any comps to last year, like, well, you didn't have Giannis going into the playoffs, and you should have assumed, even though the words hope and optimism were once again tossed around, you should have assumed Giannis is not going to play for a while in the postseason if you get there. But everything outside of that just feels different with this group. And the way Giannis is playing, you mentioned how he himself said he's having fun, and people even pointed out, man, look at the amount of times that Giannis has smiled on the court. That I don't remember how many times we've seen that. We even saw Giannis poking the bear with Malik Beasley after the game multiple times, wherever you fall on that one. But it's not just having Giannis. The way that this team is playing, I think they're playing their best basketball right now. And you mentioned the schedule. Look, the 7-game win streak, it's not great in terms of the quality opponents that you've had, where you got 2 games with the corpse of the Pelicans and the Sixers in there as well. But if we look at post All-Star break and what this team has done, they've been one of the best teams in the league. And they're doing that against a tougher schedule, especially early. And doing that without Bobby Portis for all but 3 of those games, and now a large chunk without Damian Lillard, that we have started to see this team kind of round into form. What that means for how far they can go in the playoffs, yeah, I'm with you. We don't know, but even taking the Giannis component out of it, you feel markedly better right now than you did this time a year ago when you think about how they were just kind of limping along, and you go into that final day of the regular season of like, let's try to do basically what the Indiana Pacers did tonight and game our way here to get a better matchup. And that's what makes the Pacers matchup even more interesting, is seeing how they approach tonight's game and what you take from that.
Yeah, and I think when the Dame injury happened, I mean, of course, like my first reaction was,
okay,
Dame season is over, and the
yeah,
Bucks' ambitions of competing for anything is probably over. Wah wah, sad sack, loser energy, all that. Um, Dialing up my '90s Bucks fan loser energy there, and it does feel kind of inevitable in some ways that this ended up being the playoff matchup again. Um, and of course, it stinks that there's, again, for all the vague sense of progress and optimism that may exist around Dame, again, I'm continuing to operate from until further notice that I'm not expecting to see him in the first
yeah,
round. Um, but again, it is what it is, and I think with the performances we've seen from KPJ and Ryan Rollins, they're never going to replace Dame, but they've at least made you think, hey, this team is going to have a fighting chance against whoever they play in the first round. And obviously, they're a team that has a different sort of energy about them with those guys, the kind of youth, athleticism, defensive intensity, at times gambling in maybe not great ways, but more often than not of late, what I think we've seen from Rollins and KPJ and Gary Trent has been, the sort of like chaotic turnover inducing stuff that actually is pretty valuable and pretty important. And we saw again tonight, Gary Trent, AJ Green, Kevin Porter Jr. going the distance in the fourth quarter with Bobby Portis and Giannis, similar really to the end of the Timberwolves game, which I think is an interesting wrinkle, right, for
yep,
Doc Rivers, who obviously a lot of people have questioned, the starting five. Um, Torian Prince and Kyle Kuzma principally getting, continuing to start. Although I will point out that starting lineup is like plus 10.9 net rating or something like that. Like it, everybody seems to hate it. And yet like it's been effective. Like they have outscored opponents by a lot, but everybody I think is indexing on a lot of the first quarters they've had, which have been pretty underwhelming. Um, so yeah, it's been, I don't know, again, like it's been an unpredictable year. It's been an unpredictable end of the season. You mentioned the post All-Star break numbers are 18 and 10 since the All-Star break, which obviously includes some not so great periods, like obviously the 4-game losing streak they had right before they went on this 7-game run. But I mean, that's just sort of been the story of the season, right? It's just like every like they can't have just like a 7-4 stretch or something like that. Like it seems like every 10-game segment has been just boom bust and just a yo-yo all season long. And of course there's been reasons given injuries and Bobby's suspension and things like that, but yeah, I don't, I hesitate to say they're peaking at the right time given you don't have Dame, but certainly for the group that they have and the group that they're likely to have in the first round of the playoffs, they're obviously coming in, I'd say, with good energy, good vibes, and a feeling that I think there's going to be a confidence in the locker room that
yeah.
why not, right? Like why can't we beat the Pacers in the first round of the playoffs, right? So, I'm excited to see what they can do, and I mean, after the game tonight, Justin, I did what all very cool middle-aged dads do, and that is I went to the grocery store. And as I was going, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, man, like last time I saw Giannis in the playoffs, and I indexed. So I watched Giannis's last playoff game, Game 5 against the Heat, which feels like an eternity ago, but 3 head coaches ago or whatever it was. And literally, my second child had not been born yet. She's almost 2, so she's like a fully formed person. Didn't exist at the time that the Bucks last had Giannis playing in a playoff game. So yeah, I mean, it just sort of like all underscores, I think, like you just, especially for Giannis, we talk about a lot, appreciate what this guy does, who he is, the joy he brings, the otherworldly talent he has, the once in a lifetime performances that he gives us. And especially appreciate any chance that, the Bucks are going to have to put him on the floor in the playoffs, because you just never know, right, when bad luck is going to hit and kind of things happen. And obviously you'd love if he could be out there with Dame Lillard for a change for the first time. But we'll just, whatever happens. And certainly at a minimum, if you tell me I can have one guy to roll in the playoffs with, and I don't know anybody else, give me Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? And I think certainly he has taken the challenge here over these past few weeks, especially given not looking like he was physically necessarily at his best for a little while there post All-Star break. And he has rounded into form and carried this team on his back. And, I'm going to go ahead and say he's probably going to win the coveted April NBA Player of the Month award. He won the Player of the Week award last week. So I don't know, Player of the Month awards, like, I mean, who cares in the grand scheme of the universe? But like, he's been incredible here to close the season. And, obviously he's not going to win MVP, but I'm happy for him that he's ending the season in a way that I think certainly the national media at least is taking a little bit of notice that, like, Bucks are actually
he can
looking
still do that, huh?
the Bucks are actually looking frisky, and Giannis is just the absolute engine of all this stuff, right? Especially on offense. I think Giannis showing the skill he has as a playmaker, creator, to be piling up these assist numbers. He's going to finish the season 6.5 assists, same average as last year, slightly fewer minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's career high for him. So again, like just his kind of continued evolution, growth as a player, the mid-range game this year, I mean, just I don't know, you just look at his stats and it's just kind of numbing to see how he's able to do all this stuff.
Some of what Giannis is doing, you mentioned the last time we saw him in the playoffs, so we'll take unfortunately a look back at that. And the big thing to come out of this past week or so is, you mentioned the starters, but the closers for Doc Rivers and the Bucks. We'll get into that conversation coming up after this. NBA fans, get ready for that swoosh. When you hear it, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. When any player scores 50 or more points during the 24-25 regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Whether it's a game day feast after that epic 50-point performance, you can celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot and get it delivered straight to your door. Maybe you're having some late night cravings and you stayed up late watching highlights or that 50-point performance. You just need a midnight snack. Use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Or if it's for lunch on the go, with Dash Pass, you get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus, now you save even more with this exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash.com to learn more. So you mentioned the last time we all witnessed Giannis play in a playoff game. I'm sure like we've kicked around the numbers, but
I don't want to actually talk about that game, Justin.
No,
just to be clear.
How many players are still on the Bucks that played in that game outside of Giannis? How many teammates?
Brooke, Pat, Bobby,
You nailed it. That's it.
Yeah, I
The
was gonna
whole
say like the
roster.
young guys, like I guess Marjan was on that team, but he's gone. So yeah, I mean just
Yeah.
the holdovers from the championship team who were still around by then. But yeah, I mean it's just amazing how quick things change. And you know, I bring it up a lot, and again, like I think we have to appreciate just the steadiness and reliability of someone like Giannis and kind of what he's meant to this franchise. And you just kind of take for granted, like, well, we're going to be able to be, consistently in the mix for competing for a championship so long as Giannis is around. And I think with good health, I think you at least have a shot at that, because I mean he's still the best player in the Eastern Conference, right?
Yep.
I don't think there's any question about that. Um, but yeah, I mean, you just look around. I mean, just look around what's happened with the league, even over the past few months, and as much as talking heads have tried to wish cast Giannis into a different jersey, he's still around. And you look at Dallas, right? I mean, can you imagine being told at the beginning of this year that like Dallas would have traded their franchise superstar and be, nowhere with Kyrie out for the year? I mean, where is that team going to be
That
in the
Dallas
next few
traded their
years?
franchise superstar, and he didn't ask for a trade.
Yeah, he didn't even ask for a trade, and just looking at other teams, right? I mean, even Denver, right, with Jokic being as incredible as he's been, for the Nuggets to be thrown into kind of this state of chaos here at the end of the season, with literally their coach and GM punted to the curb, and the Nuggets, who, I mean, think about it, last regular season, how many people were just saying like, oh well, the Nuggets are they're gonna go to the finals and they're the favorites because they did it last year, and nobody can stop Denver like at end of games, blah blah. And it's like, oh well, you have 2 bad weeks, or like Jamal Murray's calf bothers him in that series against the Timberwolves. Next thing you know, they're done. And then where are they this year? They're really not that different from the Bucks in terms of record, and they have their own sort of chaos they're dealing with. So you just can't take anything for granted in this league, and you never know when injuries, personalities, coaching, blah blah blah, all this stuff can get in the way real fast. And so I think, yeah, you just, again, one more reason, I think, just to appreciate, hey, Bucks may not be as good as we want them to be. They may not be real quote unquote contenders for a championship right now. Um, but until further notice, I get to watch Giannis play. Fingers crossed. He's like certainly not going to play on Sunday for very good reasons, unlike last year when he didn't play at the end of the regular season for very bad reasons. So, again, fingers crossed he can make it through a playoff series. And if he does, then again, I think we're all willing to kind of ride or die with Giannis in the playoffs. So yeah, it's just again, we said all year long, the goal for this regular season, job one, get to the playoffs healthy.
Yeah.
Not exactly not exactly mission accomplished in that regard, given where Dame is. But it is what it is, and at least there's still some hope that maybe we see Dame at some point. And I don't know. I don't know exactly what the real odds of it are. I don't know how much of it is like the optimism comes from, honestly, even like maybe for just the team feeling like, hey, we don't have to go 4 rounds without Dame. We just got to
We got to
make it
get
through the
through one
next
or
game,
two, and
get through the, just play it game by game. And at some point, hopefully Dame comes back. So I think there is that psychological component even for the team. But hey, this team, Ryan Rollins, KPJ, Gary Trent Jr., all these guys should be proud of what they've done here at the end of the year in terms of, plugging the very huge hole that Dame Lillard's absence leaves in the offense in particular. It's got to be by committee, but I think those guys have, done about as much as you could ask for. And so I'm sure they'll look at this as just a continued opportunity to show what they can do. So onward and upward.
well, and not to get sidetracked too much, but I remember earlier in the season, Camille and I had the conversation. I don't remember how it came up, but about Denver and kind of comparing the Bucks lot versus the Nuggets and who's in a better spot. And Nuggets fans caught wind of it and let us know, like, how is this even a comparison? The Nuggets are much better off than the Bucks are, and pointed to the age of the group and like, oh, all of our guys are younger. Like, look, if we want to conveniently omit the fact that Nikola Jokic is the same age as Giannis, but just because he turns 30 2 months later, we're going to say he's younger, fine. But not a whole lot of change. And then you look at everything that panned out, where it's kind of been like the Spider-Man meme. Where you fire your coach 2 years after winning a championship. Check. Your second best offensive player starts to develop these long-term issues with his health that just continue to pop up year after year after year, and don't ever really quite hit it with your right mix of role players. That all of a sudden there's all these similarities between these two teams. And Doc and all the other coaches were asked about it quite a bit in the last week, but that's the most striking thing too, is when you look at, I mean, take Steve Kerr out of the mix and all those Warriors championships. There's one coach that survived in the last decade plus of a team that's won a championship and is still coaching that team. At the Nuggets and Bucks and Toronto Raptors, all these teams have fallen victim to it. So it's one of those things where it's like life comes at you fast and you're great now. But I think what we've really started to see, and it makes it interesting for the Bucks and how you pivot, is it seems like windows are like 2 years now. That okay, you did it now, do it again next year. Otherwise, then there's trouble on the horizon. If the year after doesn't pan out, that's when the changes come.
Yeah, and to be able to deal with some of the bends in the road that you come upon, you need luck, right? Like, where would the Bucks be right now if they hadn't taken a flyer on Kevin Porter Jr., a guy that was justifiably exiled out of the league a year ago, and he gets
and even taking the off the court stuff out of it, he was one of the more inefficient and bad offensive players in the league before coming over.
He was. Exactly. And I mean, I think what we found is that was not the real, I mean, again, the ridiculous play we've seen him over the past couple months, that may also not be like the real long-term version of Kevin Porter Jr., right? I mean, he's putting up 50, 40, 90 numbers basically this season with the Bucks, and, is just like, has been incredible. Of course, like, that may not be the like scalable, sustainable version of him that you'll see over the next few years. But he obviously was, what he did in LA was not clearly representative of who he was as a player. And I think adjusting to a very diminished role in LA, trying to get back into the league, clearly that was a struggle for him to get back into and find his groove there. But interestingly, I mean, he came into Milwaukee. It's not like he was playing 25 minutes a night right when he came to the Bucks, but it's kind of that thing that, young players, unless you're, a lottery pick who's just sort of anointed that you're going to be getting major minutes and kind of working through growing pains, this is the hard part for all these role players, whether it's Ryan Rollins or AJ Green. Like, you're going to get, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in these 2 games, and then you're going to have to probably sit out some games, and maybe you're not going to play for 2 months, whatever it might be. And when you get called, you have to be ready. You have to deliver. It's incredible how difficult I think that is for guys that are not the elite players, that they can figure out how to get into grooves quickly. And so I think, those guys in particular, I think what they've done these last couple of years with Rollins and Green carving out niches in Milwaukee, and obviously KPJ here, just over these last couple months. I mean, Porter went out and won himself minutes because he went out and, he would have these amazing 5-minute stretches when Dame and Giannis were on the bench, and, literally won them a couple games with some of, these kind of one-man show performances. And, I think what's been, a night like tonight, I thought was important because we saw some of the continued growth from him with Giannis, like a couple of the alley-oops from him to Giannis, one on sort of one of those like beautiful empty kind of side pick and roll handoffs where he's going middle, Giannis is rolling baseline, and he just throws like a beautiful touch pass, Giannis reverse dunk, and then kind of an improvised alley-oop. I think it was in the third quarter, or maybe it was late fourth or third quarter, where, defense wasn't really set. Giannis is steaming down the lane, and, Porter knows, like, when the big guy's running, you find him. And so I think that's been fun. Cause I mean, to me, that's like the big question with him, other than the maturity factor stuff, which of course, like, until further notice, I mean, we saw it even tonight. He had a flagrant foul, he had the double tech. Literally, he's had, 2 games in a week where he's nearly gotten himself run out of the game, caused like fights and stuff. So on some level, like, there's an edge to that, which isn't always a bad thing. But for a guy who obviously has had issues on the court, off the court, locker room. I mean, this is his, it's not like this is his second chance. This is his like fourth chance in a lot of ways. Um, but he's taking advantage of it, right? And the Bucks have needed that in the worst possible way. And I think here in these last week, 2 weeks, having to really take that expanded role with Dame out, he's had to he hasn't just been able to be like the Kevin Porter Jr. show. He's had to actually figure out like how do you play more with Giannis? How do you play with, GTJ, who's been out there wreaking havoc with him? Feeding AJ Green, who hit a couple huge shots tonight,
Yeah.
which was awesome to see. AJ had a couple great defensive plays tonight.
Rebounding too.
Yeah, and same token, right? GT and Kevin Porter, they created more steals, like backcourt type steals that were real, I think, momentum killers for the Pistons. As they kind of kept chipping away, they get close, and then it would feel like the Bucks would create a turnover, get out on the break, and those guys. I mean, GT loves to take those early transition threes, so he's like a transition player in that regard. Porter obviously loves to push the ball, try to get to the rim, create for other guys, which is something that the Bucks obviously don't have a lot of aside from Giannis. So I think those guys have just been obviously just hugely important and really kind of letting the Bucks play different ways too. And certainly what we saw as we were discussing, in the Timberwolves game, like the way that they create havoc in that zone, which we saw for stretches tonight as well. I think in the second quarter, I want to say they trotted it out a bit. And again, neither team slowed the other down for any real extended periods, but I think it did throw the Pistons off a little bit. Not a Minnesota Timberwolves level of confusion, but it did take them out of their offense a little bit. And especially I think against a team like Indiana that loves to run pick and roll, we saw Cade, who I thought was great tonight, really get going running pick and roll against the drop. The Bucks had a hard time defending that. And when they went to zone, though, a lot harder to run a pick and roll against the zone defense. And then when they had Bobby in there instead of Brooke, I thought was another good call from Doc Rivers, because it just was a lot harder to play they wanted to. And I thought Bobby did a real nice job for the most part, like being able to rotate out and being conscious of shooters and not really being taken advantage of, to my mind, really, when he did switch or when he did get himself caught out in the perimeter, having to make sure that a guy wasn't left open for an open shot. So yeah, I mean, the Bucks are a different team without Dame, goes without saying. But I think there's certainly things that they do defensively and pace wise, offensively, that I think can really play to their favor. And so certainly from a styles makes fights perspective, I think that Indiana matchup is going to be really interesting. Especially given the different way they play now versus when Dame's healthy.
Yeah, so we'll take a quick look at that and the closing unit. You mentioned all those names, but what Doc Rivers has done with those guys that close out the game and how much that hinges on something as simple as the return of Bobby Portis. So we'll get into that conversation coming up after this. Time to talk to you about Game Time. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until you find Game Time. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer. And with their all-in pricing, you can see the total cost up front. No surprises at checkout. You can score last-minute deals up to 60% off when buying at the last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Grab those last-minute seats for any of these games coming up. The Bucks' final regular season game or as the playoffs near next week, and save big with their zone deals. You get peace of mind and can see views from your seat before you buy. No surprise fees and a lowest price guarantee means you can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. The zone, as you mentioned, we didn't see quite as much of it against the Pistons, but that is something to pull out. And Tony East, who covers does Locked On Pacers, did a story back in January about the Pacers' struggles against zone and when they've gone against it. So I'm sure we can expect to see a decent amount. That Timberwolves game, I mean, I remember talking about it during breaks too with Dave and the rest of the guys in the booth with us. I cannot believe they're struggling this much with the zone. Like, have they never seen it before? It reminded you of that. What was it? The Japanese game show skit that Chris Farley was on SNL, where he's like, give me the right.
I don't
Like,
speak Japanese. Yeah.
like that was the Timberwolves seeing the simple zone of, well, where can we pass the ball? But this group, I mean, look, as much criticism as Doc Rivers has gotten through the years, and especially from Bucks fans this year of play the young guys and don't play this guy, and especially everybody's favorite whipping boy, Brooke Lopez, Doc Rivers deserves an immense amount of credit. And granted, you got to see it in the playoffs too, but given it's become a trend, I have no reason to believe we won't. On how they've handled this approach, where it's almost like in Major League Baseball, if you don't have 5 starters you feel good about, let's have a bullpen day where we start this guy and give him the Keith Bogans treatment. You start, but you're going to play like 15 minutes and that's it. That's what we're all of a sudden seeing with Kyle Kuzma, and to a lesser extent, guys like Taurean Prince and Brooke Lopez, depending on matchup. We're seeing Doc Rivers, and he said before the game too, look, we like what that starting 5 gives us. You mentioned the net rating, but Doc's point was Taurean Prince and Ryan Rollins are pretty good spot up shooters, so we like to have them out there with Giannis. We like what Kuz gives us in terms of defensive versatility, but we also feel like we know the lineups that work in spots that they work, and wouldn't expand on that, but I think it's pretty clear the guys that we've closed the games with, like, these are the lineups that work. We're going to play our best players in the best moments.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I like, just kind of reading Twitter the last few days. Like, I know there's been a lot of, even with the win streak, a lot of, I think a lot more like lineup frustration, specifically, Kuz and Torian Prince. And, I mean, when they made the Kuz trade, like my view at the time was like, I wouldn't actually start him. I think he makes more sense coming off the bench because TP and Kuz are now your 2 like most able-bodied, like correctly sized small forwards. So if you're starting both of your small forwards and you don't really have a shooting guard out there, and Damian Lillard, who is not a point of attack defender, is your starting point guard, it's just a very weird combination of guys. And so that's why, we saw like Taurean Prince having to like initially, like he was defending like, like a Tyrese Halliburton if you played the Pacers, right? And again, I don't think that really does him any favors. I think the good news is like, I mean, as much as like I get like why everybody kind of rips on Kuzma because like the offense is just like so all over the place and unpredictable. But I've been like actually really impressed with his kind of defensive versatility, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting seeing how they've used him a lot more in those spots where it's like, the second half of the first Lakers game where they put him on Luka, and he had as good of possessions as anyone defending Luka, and they can use him even if he's not the primary guy, like he can be a switchable guy, and I think his effort level has mostly been very good. And his size obviously I think has also helped shore up some of the defensive rebounding, which still was an issue when before Bobby came back because Kuz isn't like a good rebounding power forward, but when he's a small forward, I think he helps. So on the one hand, like like it's not the starting lineup I would choose, and we'll have to see like if this becomes an issue in the playoffs, like everybody's going to be hammering on Doc because everybody's been looking at it saying like I don't really see why this makes sense, but that's actually like the one way in which the only silver lining of the Dame injury is that you at least are always having a point guard on the floor that you feel has the physicality and quickness, and can create turnovers, whether it's Rollins or KPJ, that you feel comfortable like, okay, I can live with either of those guys at least trying to slow Halliburton down, and then that they're going to go to zone probably pretty regularly, which I think especially last year it felt like I don't know how many games the Bucks went down early against the Pacers last season, and then they would use the zone to like kind of throw them off a little bit and get back into the game. It seemed like that was just sort of the recurring theme of the last season when they really struggled in the regular season. This year, obviously, they won 3 or 4, so they had better results. But yeah, I absolutely think we'll see a lot of that zone. And would it be simpler to just start one of Gary Trent Jr. or AJ Green and have one of Torian Prince and Kyle Kuzma on the floor to start? I think if you put a gun to my head, I'd probably say maybe you start GTJ and Prince because of the spot up shooting around Giannis.
Yeah.
And I'm fine keeping Rollins out there, honestly. Like I like KPJ. I think he's been the better player overall. But he's also, I think you need him more when Giannis is off than when he's on.
Yeah.
And so I think as much as we've seen some of that improved chemistry with KPJ and Giannis, it's less about what KPJ can't do and more about what he can do is why I'm actually okay with him coming off the bench, but don't have a real strong opinion. So it's kind of a weird thing. It's like I don't have a strong opinion about Rollins versus KPJ as a starter, and I have a strong opinion about GTJ or AJ as a starting 2 guard. I don't have a strong opinion about Torian Prince or Kuzma as the starting 3. But the problem is like Doc's not making a choice between one of those guys for each of those spots. He's playing TP and Kuz together, which creates again a weird dynamic. But again, you look at the data. When Dame was around before he got hurt, I think they were +6 net, that starting group that everybody sort of looked at and was like, does this make sense?
Yeah.
And since Dame's been out with Rollins as a starter, they've been plus like 11. So, it hasn't been a problem in terms of the scoreboard, which is the most important thing. But, do I fully trust it going into the playoffs? Maybe not so much. But as you said, like I think anchoring on that, I think does Doc a disservice because, again, you just think about all the criticism or people being paranoid last year when Doc came in about, oh, he's never going to play the young guys, et cetera. And now, the young guys have had huge roles this year. And, a guy like Ajax, I think, had a really long leash, even though as people look at like, oh, Doc lost faith in Ajax. He kept him in the starting 5 for a really long time when it really was not working very well.
Yeah.
And I still won't close the book on Ajax either, right? I think there's a scenario where we may see him get dusted off against Halliburton in the first round of the playoffs. So yeah, and I think again, like as just fans trying to appreciate the Bucks for what they are, I think of course, you look at where they are this year and getting to see, some of these young guys get minutes. And, even like GTJ, who's obviously not like a youngster per se, and we'll see if they can bring him back next year. He's also not old, right? He's also a guy who's, certainly in the prime of his career. So, yeah, I think there's an energy about the team, especially right now here, that just feels more fun and engaged. And, kudos to Doc, right? He hasn't been afraid to bench Brook. He hasn't been afraid to bench Prince, Kuzma, any of those guys. And, also credit to those players because I think they've been kind of rolling with the punches. And, it seems like a group that's pretty together right now, which of course winning makes that a lot easier.
Yeah. And I mean, the starting lineup becomes a much larger discussion if the Bucks fall into a hole in the first couple games of that series against the Pacers. But we'll spend a lot more time previewing that matchup and getting into our thoughts. But I think the big thing is now that we know it's Indiana and even seeing that injury report where the Pacers had a chance to get the 3 seed. I mean, I'm assuming they just said, we don't want any part of the Celtics in the second round. We'd rather play the Cleveland Cavaliers. So we're going to punt this game and we're fine with the 4 seed and getting the Bucks. Okay. I mean, it means you get Giannis this year in the playoffs, and that's the interesting part. Like that's the optimism is what they've started to find with some of these role players, how they've continued to hold up defensively. I think since the All-Star break, they're a top 10 offense, and they're slightly better than league average defensively, which I think the defense part, that was our expectation or hope coming into the season, like just be in that area, and that's where they've been. But you're going to have the best player in the conference and arguably in the league on your side in that series with the Pacers. So that's where you have that optimism of we got Giannis this time, we didn't last time. And to your point too about the backcourt, like you're going to miss a lot offensively with Dame and especially in those clutch moments, but you have 2 guards that both have size and quickness and defensive ability that at least make it more challenging for Tyrese Halliburton, where it's not an immediate, we got to put Taurean Prince or we got to go to somebody else on him. We got to figure out a way to get Damian Lillard off that matchup.
Yeah, I mean the upside obviously without Dame is you don't have like obvious guys to hunt, right? If you want to hunt AJ Green, be my guess.
Yeah.
I hope. I don't think teams. I don't see teams doing that in the way they did maybe at the start of the year before the book got out that like, oh yeah, AJ Green's actually like a pretty tough dude and moves his feet. Um, by the way, who was that against that he had that phenomenal like strip
Oh,
against?
was that yeah. Who
I'm trying
was
to remember
that?
who that was against. Regardless, he had some really good defensive plays. He had that really big rebound, I think, with 30 seconds left, crashing from the
It,
weak side for the offensive rebound
was it
to
Schroeder?
give
It
the
was
Bucks the
either
lead.
Schroeder or Holland, I thought.
Yeah, maybe it was Schroeder. Oh yeah, I think it was Schroeder because then Schroeder fouled him too.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I mean, we gotta like Dennis Schroeder. One of the truly huge pains in the ass of the Milwaukee Bucks over the last few years. The fact that he actually was pretty well contained and frustrated, and there was some fun trash talking after he flopped on when KPJ like kind of bumped into him on an inbounds, and then KPJ went down the floor. And did he throw an alley oop or something? I don't know. I know the Bucks scored like right
They
after.
scored. I think that was one of the Giannis alley-oops,
Yeah,
yeah.
they got the bucket right after Schroeder just threw himself to the ground theatrically, grabbing his face. So yeah, it was an entertaining game in terms of the chatter. And I mean, I fully expect KPJ and Halliburton I'm sure are going to have some conversations in this next series. Which again, like you kind of like the edge, right, to some extent, but also you gotta contain yourself a
Gotta
bit and that.
contain it. You can't get ejected like Bobby in what, game 4 last year?
Yeah, or throw stuff at people in the stands like
Or
Patrick
that.
Beverly.
Yeah.
So and that's why too. It's like it's been interesting. Some people have been asking about like the Bucks kind of offseason options, like what can they do to retain KPJ and Rollins and GTJ and stuff like that. And I mean, obviously we don't need to go kind of deep into it, but it's most likely the Bucks can have the full mid-level exception. They're not going to create real cap space so long as you've got Dame, Giannis, and Kuzma taking up 130 million of 154 million dollar cap. So there is a path they could have the full mid-level of about 14.1 million available, and they would need that to give either GTJ and or KPJ contracts above, like, I mean, they can pay them a little bit more than the minimum,
Yeah.
but that's probably like if you're trying to think like how do the Bucks keep those two guys in particular, it's basically how do you, I think, use the full mid level and try to split that some way between those guys. And it's been interesting. Like I think some people think that like KPJ could make more than whatever, but I really don't
I
think
mean,
people are
I think in
gonna.
the case of both guys, it's just a casualty of the CBA that
Yeah,
you can't afford to pay big money, or bigger at least, when people are tossing around like this guy could get 10, 15, 20 million, like somebody even kicked that around for KPJ. Like that's not going to happen in this CBA when it's basically you get mid levels and vet minimums and your max contracts. That's it.
yeah, I mean, the Brooklyn Nets have just like a ridiculous amount of cap space this summer. Other than that, like when I look at it quickly, Pistons 24 million, Pelicans 22 million, Bulls 20 million, Rockets 19 million. I mean, again, like nobody, like it's not like there's a bunch of teams that have multiple $20 million slots they can throw
Yeah.
around. And so I think what you see is exactly what we saw like with Gary Trent last year, right? You get
Mhm.
a lot of guys who are pretty good rotation players chasing like taxpayer mid-level slots, right?
Yeah.
5-6 million bucks. And some guys might get close to full mid-level deals. But if you're a guy that if you're like a starting caliber point guard and a team really feels committed to you, like an Emmanuel Quickly, you're going to make a ton of money.
Yeah.
But there is a huge drop off then to everybody else. Like if you look at like point guard contracts signed last summer, I mean, guys, Tyus Jones signed a minimum contract. Like there are a lot of like very good like rotational guys, and so the idea that KPJ, I mean, hey, I hope Kevin Porter Jr. has the biggest first round playoff series in the history of time and earns a $20 million contract against all odds,
Yeah.
despite like all the concerns about him and his history. But if we're going to be kind of level headed about it, like, to make a more than the mid level, like some team has to look at you and say, like, that guy is our
That,
starting point
yeah.
guard. And let's be honest, like, yeah. And so we'll see, but I think
Yeah.
he's obviously put himself in a much better position, as long as he doesn't, do something horrendous over the next few weeks, which is always sort of in play. He's certainly earned himself, I'd say certainly a higher salary than he's on this year, he's fought his way back into the league, which honestly, like, mid-season this year, like he
No, but
was.
yeah. He
Was anybody
was,
going to want to put up with
yeah.
him, right, and take the chance on him?
It was a man, he's got a player option too. So
Yeah.
he's here next year. And that, to your point, it's a good thing for you in the short term if, hey, he's all of a sudden, yeah, somebody does want to pay him that much money because it means what he did in the playoffs. Can they extend him if he picks up his player option?
Extension, I mean, generally, I think, if I remember correctly, like, you have to have at least a
I
3-year
don't think you have,
deal.
yeah.
Yeah, you have to at
Yeah.
least have a 3-year deal, and I think after 2 years, you can, quote, unquote, "extend
Yeah.
it." So, it wouldn't be an extension per se. I mean, again, could a guy like that, do the "I'll sign for the," quote, unquote,
The Bobby Portis
max
deal from
the
a
max
couple
the
years ago.
exactly, the Bobby
Yeah.
Portis, and then after the second year, you have early bird rights and you can pay him, over basically a little
Yeah.
over the mid level, which is what happened with Bobby. Like, of course, they could do that, but if you're, I mean, if you're KPJ, you're KPJ's agent, given his track record, like, I think you're going to take all the
Whatever
guaranteed
you offer.
money you
Yeah.
can get.
Yeah.
And I just, again, like, if someone offered him the taxpayer mid level over 2 years, which is that's only a 2-year contract, wouldn't be shocked by that at all, given
Mhm.
kind of what we've seen, right? But even that, like, teams are very careful, right, about
Yeah.
even those types of contracts, much less, a mid-level deal at 14 million, starting salary. I mean, keep in mind the Rockets, like, when they gave him the quote unquote big contract, which that wasn't even $20 million a year,
No, I know.
there was a ton of non-guaranteed money in that. Like,
Yep.
they didn't trust him to,
Yeah.
to not get into trouble. And so, again, hopefully that is the old KPJ. And the Bucks, I think, do have an inside line. The vibes, I mean, listening to his
Well, and
comments after the game about Giannis and stuff, like, I think he really appreciates. Obviously, the Bucks have given him this
yes.
chance, but like, if Dame's coming back and Rollins is coming back, and his role is like a 15-minute, 20-minute per game guy, if he can play more and make more elsewhere, of course, yeah, I mean, he'll take that. But I don't think he's going to have like some huge market, just because
No.
nobody does in that role.
And your point too about his spot with the Bucks and the fit there and some of the things he's talked about like acceptance and being wanting to be a place where he felt wanted and all those things. I do know the Bucks were in pretty hard on him in the offseason and had him in town for workouts, and they thought they were going to sign him until he landed that Clippers deal. So this has gone back a ways that there is at least that open line and that part of the relationship, which some means nothing. It could be everything. It could be nothing. But this has been, it's not just the trade deadline. They've been in on Kevin Porter Jr. for some time. Probably started the night he scored 50 points against him of, hey, here's this.
Well, they drafted him technically, right?
Well, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, they traded the pick before he was ever drafted, but technically, I think technically this is all full circle in the grand scheme of the universe. That John Lure contract they took back, right, in the Tony Snell trade. That, man, that feels like ancient history at this point.
As I said, we'll get into predictions, previews, all of that for the series once we get into the week. We know it's the Bucks and the Pacers. I think we know every matchup in the Eastern Conference, like save for who's going to come out of the play-in tournament. So it is set up a rather uneventful day on Sunday, and
I'm okay
national
with that.
game.
I'm good with that.
A national game for the Bucks and the Pistons, and Bobby Portis let the cat out of the bag too, and said in the post game, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to not playing on Sunday. We all are. So could be a big Pete Nance game."
I was gonna say, so who actually plays on Sunday? Do they play would Rollins? I mean, like somebody has to play.
I mean,
Like,
somebody's going to have to. Yeah.
yeah, like does Porter / Rollins, like at least one of those guys, I'm guessing, might play.
Yeah, like possibly both, that they just play a little bit and then it becomes like that final game against the Hawks in Bud's first year where it was just the Bonzi Colson and Tim Frazier game of you guys are playing 48 to 53 minutes. Go get him, Jamari Bouye.
Get Jamari Bouye in daily fantasy for Sunday. It could be
Get
his
Stanley Mude. I feel like he's going to be chucking a lot of threes.
Chris
Ajax is going to
your
play.
boy Chris Livingston, Justin.
Chris Livingston's got his breakout opportunity.
This could be. Let's be realistic. This could be the last time Chris Livingston plays any real minutes because I don't think he has a guaranteed contract next year. So, Chris Livingston, show us what you got, buddy. This is a big opportunity for you.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one. It'll be a fun one to recap. That's for sure. But yes, the Bucks and
by the way,
Pacers.
I want to win. It's not going to be 50 wins. I want 48 wins, Justin. I don't want to settle for 47 wins. I hope the Pistons rest everybody too, and I hope the Bucks children beat the Pistons children to get to that.
I could see JB just
plateau.
playing everyone. Like that's the edge
Just
of this
epic.
team. Like, no, we're playing for the city.
He's like wants to play. We didn't talk enough about the block, the Giannis block and shimmy of Beasley.
Okay,
One of the great. I mean, obviously they're friends. They know each other, which Giannis doesn't do that if not for their relationship. But I mean, that was. I tweeted it like Giannis has some incredible clutch blocks. I've never seen him get a funnier clutch block in any situation than that. I mean, that was just so hilarious.
He just engulfed him, and I mean, he did the shimmy 3 times, and then just kept up the like, what's the big deal? Like, why are you so mad?
And then I thought when he was like offering him 5 when they were going down the court, then I thought he was gonna pull the like Jaylen Brown too slow thing. I was like, don't do that. Don't do that, Giannis.
There were literally
Please don't do that.
Like, we're gonna see Beef Stew sprint off the bench.
Oh my god. I was not sad to not. I didn't realize that Beef Stew was injured. But yeah, I was not unhappy to see him on the bench. And I mean, it was chippy enough without him that if he was in that game, I would have been very concerned. By the way, speaking of which, that Kevin Porter Jr. dunk on Jalen Duren, I mean, that was a gorgeous, incredible facial right hand. KPJ is like,
he's had a few of them.
I talk a lot about Giannis and his like offhand dunking. I don't even know. Like, it feels like KPJ when he usually goes up for those two-handed dunks in transition.
Yeah,
it feels like he usually goes up with his right hand. I want to say.
Yeah.
So he's one of those guys who has sort of like that weird kind of ambidextrousness to his game, which of course is like a huge weapon, even if he's nominally a lefty. But that was an incredible detonation on Duren, which of course then took all of 15 seconds, I think, before he got a flagrant and the hard screen that kind of escalated it further. But it seemed like it was kind of funny seeing KPJ and Duren they were, I think, kind of joking a little bit not long after. So it cooled down pretty quickly.
We'll see if that edge is still there Sunday, tomorrow, when you listen to this.
Honestly, I wouldn't play KPJ like on Sunday, probably like just to avoid any chance of carryover. Play Ryan Rollins. Nobody's going to want to punch Ryan Rollins in the face. Let KPJ maybe sit that one out, cool down a little bit.
I mean, I am expecting like 40 minutes for Jamari Bouye, for Pete Nance, for if Tyler Smith is over the ankle issue, Tyler Smith, like that's what you roll with. If you guys are playing basically the whole game.
How does Tyler Smith have an ankle injury? Did he get it with the hurt or something like that? I feel like this, like Marjon Beauchamp always showed up on injury reports with like these random injuries. And I was always like, are these like real injuries? Like,
and his always came at an opportunity when somebody else was down of like, okay, this could be a Marjon game. Oh, he's out.
Yeah, it was all very strange. Yeah, it's going to be Pete Nance's time to sign on Sunday. And if Pete Nance is going to need to score 20 points and then get into a fight with Ron Holland or something at the end of the game to defend the Bucks' honor or something like that. I'm actually curious, is Malik Beasley going to like campaign hard to play in this game so he can score like 30 points against the Bucks G League team? I'm very fascinated to see what happens here, but hopefully Giannis and Bees are hugging out by the end of the game. You can't stay mad at Giannis.
Well, thank God it's a meaningless game now, and we can start to get set for the Bucks and the Pacers for a second consecutive year. That will do it for today's show. For Frank, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.